that underlying chronic anxiety is transgenerational. Parents' unresolved anxiety and issues. If the parents don't resolve them, guess who gets to resolve them? The children. It's okay that it takes time and to not be concerned or upset about that. You don't have to be in a hurry, but it is good to stay on the path. And if you know the right map or path, you'll see how taking a step on that path, each step, no matter how small, benefits you. Hey, hi everyone. This video is entitled, "It is Normal for Children of Narcissistic Parents and Dysfunctional Families to be Behind in Life." Now that doesn't mean no children of narcissistic parents are successful or get ahead in life in some ways, but I think for a lot, they were handicapped by their family of origin. And I've helped many who are fairly successful, even adult children of narcissists, but then they get stuck and they can't get through the wall of their career, of finances, or of relationships, or they just get stuck and they feel like others may be surpassing them. They're smart, they're creative, but their family emotional programming does and can hinder them. Being a child of a narcissistic parent often means starting life with a heavy emotional backpack. And that's not your fault. Many children of narcissist parents face unique challenges that hold them back in ways that simply they can understand. But there is hope. And it starts with understanding why this happens and how you can reclaim your life. My name is Jerry Wise, and I've been helping people for over 45 years to self-differentiate, get unstuck, transform their lives, and get their dysfunctional family systems out of them. Also to heal from narcissistic parenting and build a strong, confident sense of self. My own journey of self-differentiation has shown me that no matter where you start, change is possible. In today's video, we'll talk about why it's completely normal for children of narcissists to feel behind in life, even to feel it, whether they are or not. They will feel behind or feel like they didn't get the memo. And more importantly, how you can move forward at your own pace with confidence and clarity. Number one, adult children of narcissists were raised without a healthy emotional or relational roadmap. And when I say an emotional roadmap, I mean, we get stuck in cause and effect thinking, which is what we were often taught, and not given the benefit of mature, healthy systems thinking. Because our parents and our family didn't think in a systemic way. They thought in cause and effect way, a very simplistic way. They also, those of us who grew up in dysfunctional families, can have a certain level of malignant normalcy or family trances, as I call them, being in a family trance. It's like what we have been hypnotized or programmed to think, feel, believe, act. For example, like being screamed at, it was normal growing up. And then that became normalcy that was malignant, not good normalcy. But we thought it was normal and continue to think it's normal. Because we think it's normal, it doesn't mean we like it, and it doesn't mean we're happy with it. No, but we still accept it or still believe, that's just the way life is. And so we find partners that might be emotionally abusive, physically abusive, religiously abusive, financially abusive, because that's our malignant normalcy. We accept that. That's a part of our pseudo-self that we learn from our family of origin. And until we shake our head, so to speak, until we wake up from that, then we're going to have a lot of trances that we'll be living in and malignant normalcy that we will be using as glasses to see the world. We also had little self in terms of growing up, not much talk about self, not much modeling about self. We're not given healthy boundaries and shown healthy boundaries with respect and love and those things which help us to develop a sense of self. So then we're kind of behind emotionally, maybe mentally, maybe physically, kind of developmentally. And I don't mean that as a diagnosis. I mean, we stay kind of immature. That's what I mean. And we also did not get that trust map that's a part of a healthy emotional roadmap. And how we trust others or how we trust ourselves. That was never shown to us, never even encouraged. And so we grow up and carry that on into adulthood and then wonder why we get stuck, wonder why we can't break through, wonder why we can only get to go this far, and then with the ceiling, we can't go beyond that. And oftentimes it has to do with family programming that we get stuck. And I've talked to presidents of companies, managers, salespeople, business people to help them break through that barrier. But it takes, like everything else, a determination to recover from this so we can move right on past that. But we have to recover to do that. Secondly, emotional energy was spent on surviving, not growing or maturing or becoming fully healthy as an adult or even as an older child. We then spent a lot of time with reactivity when we were growing up, a lot of worry, a lot of fear, anger, hurt, versus more of a calm focus on yourself as you're developing and a self-focus rather than just always other focused. What does she think? What is she doing? What does he think? What is he doing? How can I please them? How can I lower my guilt, my shame? We spend a lot of time in those games and not as much time in focusing on my own self-development in terms of being a mature, healthy adult that's confident and free from family programming and dysfunction. Number 3, you are programmed to prioritize others over yourself. And that's kind of that other focus that I mentioned. We may even focus on gaining more data versus knowing ourselves. And I think a lot of people, and I definitely encourage reading books, reading recovery books, reading good, healthy books to aid us in our maturity and growth process. But many times, and I remember I probably read 1,000 self-help books and donated those to my graduate school because I infused myself with lots of data and hoping that would help change me. But what I wasn't doing was knowing I did not know how to focus on myself. I didn't have a good map, and I just really didn't know what to do to be a healthy me. And all those books would say, do this, do this, do that, which made sense, but I didn't come away changed. I came away with more data. And so we grew up with other focus as being important. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? Versus self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-differentiation. We didn't learn those things growing up. And that was a part of our faulty map that we got. And adult children of narcissists, I find most, if not almost all, have a struggle with those things. It doesn't mean they can not get a good job or not get married or not have kids. No, you can do lots of different things, but there's just some unhappiness, dysfunction, a lack of clarity, and maybe, again, not having that self-regulation, self-awareness, and self-differentiation. We lack in those areas. Fourthly, guilt and shame slowed our growth and slowed our decision making for becoming healthy, whole, and developing into adulthood. And in adulthood, we often have pre-guilt, pre-shame, and that's where we're always on guard about shame or guilt we're going to have. And so that's too much of a focus on guilt and shame. Not only do we have pre-guilt and pre-shame, then we have the shame and the guilt for the act. Then we have the hangover of the shame and the guilt. So there's an awful lot of noise going on around shame and guilt. A lot of emotional and mental noise. And that really does hold us back. So there is that pre-guilt, the post-guilt, the guilt and shame for our actions, thoughts, words, and relationships. Number 5, as an adult child of a narcissist, our confidence was undermined by constant criticism and control. And I think many would attest to that, growing up in a narcissistic parent home. Constant criticism and constant work towards controlling and being controlled. And that was very uncomfortable for us. And when you're growing up with those kinds of pressures, we just don't come out as healthy as we normally would be in a different type of family. Sixthly, you were taught to fear independence or self-differentiation from family or parents. Now, that doesn't mean you didn't become reactive. And like I've mentioned before, in terms of a pendulum way of living, we're either the victim or the Viking. The Viking is, I don't give a care what you say. I'm mad at you. You're treating me wrong, and you always have treated me wrong. That's just reactivity, which is just as enmeshing as being a victim and just rolling over and being a doormat or just compliant. They're 180 degrees from unhealthy is unhealthy. What we want to learn to become is self-differentiated, which is the 90-degree mark. And I talk more about that in my online program. But you were taught to fear independence because you don't want to get too far from the family, and you still have some work that you're hoping that you can do, which might help you get the parents you always deserved and wanted. Though that is a fool's errand, and it is a fantasy, and I've been on both the fantasy and the fool's errand, so I know those very well, of trying to change the family so that I can be happy. And oftentimes, because of our enmeshment with the family, and narcissism and dysfunction are both enmeshing concepts. They are concepts and dynamics in families that enmesh. And so independence is not welcome. You need to keep being part of the family and being controlled, criticized, and useful puzzle piece in the puzzle of the family. Number 7, adult children of narcissists have a need for perfectionism, and this held us back. That perfectionism. And it was forced on us by our narcissistic parent or our dysfunctional family. And so we always have to try to be perfect because we're trying to win approval and to avoid criticism and avoid shaming and guilting. So perfectionism became very important. And perfectionism is a real difficult thing to shake. I use some very good techniques to try to help me deal with my perfectionism. I remember doing my first master's degree and doing the thesis for that master's degree, and I couldn't get it done because I was a perfectionist. So I kept working on it. And my supervisor finally said, Jerry, just get it done. It doesn't have to be perfect. But it was very difficult for me to do that. And that was getting in the way of my own career, my own advancement, because I couldn't do it. Because what would somebody think about this if it wasn't perfect? Well, they'd probably look at it and go, oh, well, okay, it might be mediocre. That's fine. But I still get the degree. I mean, it's okay if it's mediocre. I wasn't going to go into heavy research in a PhD program. And so perfectionism was very ingrained in me. And I had to learn things like anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. I had to learn things like, okay, let's try to be mediocre and that will be fine. There's no shame in mediocre. And everybody's always saying, well, do your best, be your best. You must be perfect. You must be the very best of. Why? That may not serve you very well at all. Now, does that mean I don't think people could work hard to accomplish something amazing? No, we can do that. But you're more likely to maybe do that if you're calmer and more focused and more clear than if you're just caught up in the perfectionism. Number 8, often adult children of narcissists still struggle with systems anxiety. Systems anxiety is created by this enmeshment early on in a family in which we are connected emotionally in the emotional Wi-Fi of the family, everyone's connected to the family super self, and so everyone gets pinged by each other. And some have even said the family is an anxiety management mechanism. And I think there is truth to that. In other words, we learn how to function through our anxiety triggering. And that anxiety triggering can start out being very unconscious. And in fact, when you talk to people and someone's being reactive, you have the person who might be less self-differentiated, and someone says something to them that's upsetting. That triggers their underlying chronic anxiety from the family that they may not even be aware of. Then they go to reactivity, and then they're reactive to this person and don't realize it's not just the reactivity that was the difficulty, it's the ongoing chronic anxiety that hasn't been dealt with and oftentimes is unconscious. But we can learn how to recognize it more and even learn how to reduce our chronic anxiety. So I don't get pinged and poked all the time. And again, it's a lower brain activity. But I think there are some things that we can do to help make that less of a problem for us. Because I think so many people function based on that underlying chronic anxiety and don't even realize it. And they just don't even, they're not aware of themselves. They don't have this self-awareness of that. So we then struggle with systems anxiety, and that's a part of that systems anxiety, that underlying chronic anxiety, which is transgenerational. Parents' unresolved anxiety and issues. If the parents don't resolve them, guess who gets to resolve them? The children. Anything I don't resolve, my son gets to resolve. And this chronic anxiety can cause reactivity, fight or flight reactions, shut down, dissociation. It can be the underlying emotional pinning for those symptoms and those experiences. I talk more about that in the training and in the online program as well. Number 9, adult children of narcissists grew up with the family super self distracting them from them. Or the family super self distracted you from you. The family super self includes all these roles we're supposed to play. If you're playing a role, you're not being authentic. If you're playing a role, you're not self-differentiated. But we were called to play those roles to manage the pain and dysfunction in the family and also keep the anxiety down more. Is that chronic anxiety. If everyone plays their role, then we all know what our script is that we have to do, and that's less anxious and less anxiety. But these pulls of the roles you were to play, we end up still playing them as adults. And so again, we're distracted from us. We're now focused on the roles, or how can I change this? Or, I have this chronic anxiety, which then triggers reactivity. Then I get angry. And if I only work on just changing my anger or anger management, and I'm for anger management, so I think it's a very important program. But if I focus on that level, I might miss the reactivity and miss the underlying chronic anxiety, which actually triggers that anger. But that's more about learning something about us and focusing on us, which is an important task that we have to do as we mature and grow. Number 10, recovery takes time, and that's okay. I would not get pulled in by quick fixes. If you only do these 5 steps, then you can break through and you can break free and become transformed. I just don't think transformation happens that way. Could it? Anything could be. Sometimes people can change in an instant. Sometimes they need to change over 30 years. And change happens like that in the world that we live in and the creatures and human beings that we are. And so it's okay that it takes time and to not be concerned or upset about that. You don't have to be in a hurry, but it is good to stay on the path. And if you know the right map or path, you'll see how taking a step on that path, each step, no matter how small, benefits you and benefits you and benefits you. Versus the quick fix approach, which means I can kind of feel really good about my change, and then I go right back and am the same as I was before. So monumental change may not be as good if I just go back to being the same. That's why I think we need a good map. And that's what self-differentiation and family systems theory helps you with, a great map to use that's very focused on how human beings interact and relate and ping each other and emotionally connect or disconnect from each other. So what are some self-differentiation tips? Be compassionate toward yourself. Self-acceptance, self-compassion are very powerful change agents in one's recovery. As an adult children of narcissists, actually as an adult children of any dysfunctional family. Self-acceptance, accept where you are today. In other words, don't fight with where you are and fight with yourself about where you should be. Of course you want to be over here, but this is where you're at. So you're not integrating yourself. And integrating yourself and going, I am not ready to do that yet. For example, I'm not ready to give up feeling guilty when my wife does these things, or my mother, or my father, or siblings, or whomever. I'm not ready to do that. And love yourself anyway. You'll more likely change and become ready if you do that than if you just keep fighting within yourself. Being hard on yourself is the family super self at play. When you are self-critical, hypercritical, shaming of yourself, guilting of yourself, negative talk to yourself, many people go, I just treat myself that way. Well, yes, you are treating yourself that way. Do you know, though, that's the remnant or residual from your family super self that you were programmed with growing up? It's not the true you. Being hypercritical of yourself is not genuine self. It's a self you're supposed to be for the family. And you learn to be that for the family. And it can be helpful to realize that's not really me. I'm not saying you don't really think it or feel it, but we want to begin to get more distance from it and go, I know that's how I feel and think, but that really isn't me. It's not Jerry. It's Jerry channeling the family super self and the family programming. Well, if you know you're channeling something, you have a better chance of maybe changing it than if you think, this is just how I am. This is just me. And I was very critical of myself and shaming. And I would call myself names and all kinds of difficulties in my head. And I'd call myself stupid and ignorant and a moron. And can you be so dumb, Jerry? And I'm going, is that really me? Where is that coming from? Well, guess what? It comes from someplace. So if you're ready to finally break free from the grip of narcissistic parent abuse and build a strong, confident sense of self, join my free training today. Learn to build the self you were never allowed to have. Click the link below and get started. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon, to see new videos every week. I publish those regularly. It's time to get your family out of you and finally live as your true differentiated self. I want to thank you for watching. Have a great day and be wise.